Saturday, everybody. I hope you're all well. Today, I will tell the tale of those telling tales. Um, I used to always listen to Tupac, and I would often hear his message about the media. He had a real beef with the media, and he would say they were full of dirty tricks and they're liars and what have you. And I never had any experience with them. When I would listen to him, like today, I'm a nobody. The media didn't have any reason to engage with me, to ask me for stories, anything. And so I had zero experience. All I heard what Pac would say, and I had no context. I'm going to tell you about the day I got context. So there was this guy that lived on my street, and we would sometimes hang out at each other's homes. He had a pigeon coop in the back. He'd show us about pigeons. And there was a whole bunch of, just young people that lived on that street at that time. And by young, I mean, from sophomores in high school to, 25, 26. And everybody kind of ran around together. The kids that were in the school would go to school and do stuff and then come back, and older cats would help them figure out how to make money at school. And there was always this atmosphere of looking for a come up. If there was a shopping center, one street over with the Kmart, a lot of stores, and so let's just say allegedly, sometimes everybody in the neighborhood would have 4 or 5 bags of dog food or things that were in the back cages of the stores. People would find bikes that were being used by, I'll just say it. There was also a tow yard there. And I remember somebody used to pull up on a bike, hop the fence, and go burglarize the cars. And then somebody that lived on our street stole his bike while he was burglarizing the cars. So that's the kind of atmosphere it was, right? And very few people worked. I remember having a job at a grocery store, but I would come back and, there'd be 10, 15 people either in front of my house, the house next door, or the house next door, or 4 houses down, or 8 houses down, or up the street a little bit. And it was all the same people, right? And some of them were, more hustlers than others, and would do, anything for a buck. One in particular, I loved homeboy. He was also Pac's definition of a rider. If someone came and said, "Hey man, we got to go do this, we might not make it back," he would go, not think twice about it. And if you were gonna go do some nickel and dime, hey man, I'm gonna go steal some candy bars to sell, he would go. And I'm not saying I was offering these jobs to him. I'm just saying I would go. But I would give him jobs. And I wouldn't give them to him. He would ask for them. So, I lived at my mom's, and she'd say, "Hey, you got to mow the lawn today, and your dog is pooped in the yard. You got to go pick it up." Sometimes he'd come by and be like, "Hey, man, I'll do that for you for $10. And I had a job, so I was like, all right, fuck it, I don't want to do it. So I'd give him the $10. And then, and he was cool in that he'd take those 10, maybe go buy a 5 bag of Bammer. And, because you used to get fat Bammer bags back in the days. And when people bought Bammer, right? And 240s. And then he was sharing with everybody on the street who, if he had a big come up one day, it was gone 2 days later, And so one day his house gets raided, and he has a remote control in his hand, which law enforcement said they thought was a gun, and so they shot him. And he survived and ended up getting a fat settlement because of that. But that night, that was on all the news channels. And they said that he was one of the biggest kingpins, if not the biggest kingpin in California, from this part of the state to that part of the state. Basically, half of the state. And the truth is that he'd been around us for years. I'd seen his wife complain to him that they didn't have enough to make ends meet sometimes. That she has friends whose husbands are in jail and she still gets more money from him than this guy could provide free. Other neighbors would let him pick up after their dog in exchange for a couple of bucks. I'd been to his house. There was no faking the funk. It wasn't, there are a couple people who might have a shitty looking house on the outside, and inside it is immaculate because they want to portray that humility just for whatever reasons, right? And even Tupac would say, I stay dressed bummy so the cops don't fuck with me or something like that. But this wasn't faking it. I'd been around here for years, and like, we'd seen his struggles. Now, I know that, at least folks who maybe grew up in the hood or around the streets know people who are hustlers and know everybody. And if someone said, hey, you know where I can find this? They would say, I do know where you can find it. I'll go get it for you. And then they'll mark up the price, 100, 200, 300, depending on what they want. And that 100 or 200 is a huge come up for this person. And it'll be spent by tomorrow. Probably give 100 to the missus for bills and groceries and, pay as you go. And then, spend another 50 on something for their car. And then another 50 is a party with all the friends. Everybody's drinking and smoking. And he was a homie, man. This dude, he was so cool. Best storyteller, man. He was way cool. And and he was painted by the media as something that he wasn't. He might have came up $200, which the biggest pharmaceutical provider in half of the state is not gonna go to those extremes to fake it. And so what happened is he probably called somebody to ask for something, was told it's $5, ran back, told the other guy, hey, he wants 7. Okay, I'll give you 7. Okay, I'm gonna come get it. I got the 5. Takes it, like, all this risk for some crumbs. But the media made him seem like he was the mastermind because that's who got caught. And I think in a way he was lucky because from what I read and see in the news now, if that would have happened today, he might have caught a RICO and got washed up. And he didn't. He caught some, I don't even know what the outcome was. But I know he got a settlement because he got shot and he didn't have a gun. And then he moved away to where his wife lived, which was like hours and hours away. But he'd come back to visit now and then. And he wouldn't find me now because, my mom died. And I have no connection to the house no more. And that's kind of where people would go look for us, right? But he would come back and he would be in a nice car, and because he was always hella like grimy, like always working his car, always had grease in his hands, stains on his shirts. And here was the other thing about this dude: he was probably $120 wet, always grimy. The stigma of racism. He was black. And that motherfucker had game where he could mac any woman in the neighborhood. Any woman. There was this lady that had like a rich house, like one of the nicer houses in the neighborhood, the most beautiful, thickest thighs. She was fucking gorgeous, man. To me, that was the ideal woman, and I didn't have the courage to even like approach her or talk to her. And one day I tell him, I was like, I bet you can't mac that one. He went over there and talked to her, and then one day I'm riding my bike down the street and I see him having dinner at her house with her, and this fool lived like 2 streets over and was married and shit. But he was hella cool, and because of him, I got to see how the media like just pretty much judged, convicted him, and wrote him off before anyone even knew what had happened. And I'd also add that, like, it was interesting because the first city council meeting I went to, I saw a city council member there that I'd never heard of. I hadn't followed him. It wasn't even close to my district, the other side of the city. And he started calling out his fellow city council. And he was saying things that I say about the city council. He pretty much said that they were putting the wants of developers ahead of the needs of the community. And like, I was so blown away. I was like, oh, this is the greatest politician ever. And then I shared that. And then people who do know him, who do attend city council meetings much more than I did, that was kind of me starting to do it, right? They're like, nah, he's not that cool. He just did that for whatever reason. It's totally out of character for him to be like that. And so that's another thing, first impressions might not be the right ones, because he was a rock star on that first impression. And then people who knew him were like, well, that's not the real him. But my point is, the next day, the media, the same one that said, part of the media, because there were several outlets that reported on the homie being this person he wasn't. But one of those outlets ran a story on this politician the next day. This fool lives in a mansion in a fancy neighborhood and doesn't even live at the house where he has to live to have been elected for this district. And I'm like, oh, damn, the next day? And then the day after that, lots of arrests at his property, slumlord, like they just started fucking him up. And all these things were maybe known, I'm guessing, but they didn't matter until he went against the grain. And once he went against the grain, they've been constantly, the media beating him up. And the media here, they often seem aligned with the political nature of the city. And so that's how I learned about what Tupac was talking about when he talked about the media, not always being honest, having dirty tricks, etc. Having been a victim of it himself, right? And so, like, I worry about them. I do. I'm like, man, it's because they have all those resources, and people, it's generally understood the pen is mightier than the sword, and they are the pen, and I'm not the sword anyways, but they're pretty powerful, and might makes right in that world, not the other way around as it should be. It could be the other way around if they focused on telling the truth and having integrity in that. But even if they didn't intend to, harm, my neighbor, friend, it was a negative, it could have had very negative consequences. A juror might have read that and then used it against him. I don't think it went to trial, but I just remember him getting paid, coming back to visit. One time he was visiting, he took me to like treating me, I think, to some Taco Bell or something like that. And he saw a little dog and called it over, threw it in his car, and stole it. And I'm like, man, this friggin' dude. Um, but he was fun. He was fun. He was cool. I haven't seen him in probably 20 years. My mom passed away. That's probably where he would have went to look for me. And you know, I'm not. My mom's gone, so I wish him the best. I hope he's doing well. The purpose of this video was just to share how I came to see what Tupac was talking about when he would talk about the media, because of my friend who was labeled a kingpin, and really he was picking up neighbors' dogs' poop and mowing their lawn for about $4 or $5. And if the neighbors had a beer in a Bammer sack, he would have did it for that and just cut out the money altogether. He wasn't that. So he's cool now, though. He got paid. He's cool now. Anyways, much love, y'all. I hope you have a good one.